Welcome to the Reversion to the Mean podcast, hosted by Justin Castelli of RLS Wealth Management and Kevin of ferventfinance.com. On Reversion to the Mean, Justin and Kevin will discuss the week's top financial Twitter shares and distill them down to what's necessary and what's noise. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Nothing discussed on this podcast should be considered professional advice. The opinions expressed by the hosts are theirs and theirs only.
Welcome to episode 34 of Reversion to the Mean. This week, we're going to kick it off with some bubbly. LaCroix sales bubble pops, stock tumbles. This was a Wall Street Journal headline, which was kind of funny. I've never been a huge fan of LaCroix. I'll drink carbonated water from time to time, but I know, isn't it like a big millennial thing, LaCroix? Isn't that what we get made fun of for?
That's what I was going to say. I was going to ask if this meant it was a top for the millennials. In one way, either millennials' income is topped out, or we're graduating to being more responsible and moving on past bubbled water. We used to go through spurts of drinking it. It's not bad. It's better than, obviously it's better than drinking Coke, but I have a friend that lives in Bloomington, Indiana, and he was telling me that he was geeking out on it, and he tested the acidity of it, and it was real high. Basically, if you've drank too much of it, it would rot your teeth. So it may not have all the bad effect of soda. It still wasn't really good for you because of the acidic in it. I know that they always get a lot of heat that they said natural flavors, but they never really said what those natural flavors were. But I just thought this was a funny one to start it off with instead of always going straight into finance.
Yeah, and I guess the reason it got a bunch of press is because the CEO had a weird message in the earnings release where he said negligence nor mismanagement nor woeful acts of God were not the reasons. Much of this was the result of injustice. And I guess the injustice is surrounding, people kind of calling out the fact that it's probably not made of, natural flavors. And I guess they've kind of been mysterious about that. They haven't really shared, how they do their flavoring. So, in this day and age where people are drinking water to try to be healthy, and then you go to find out that maybe your carbonated water isn't as healthy as you thought. So, I guess their profits fell 39% year over year, which is a pretty big decline.
I was glad to see the article give Topo Chico a shout out. Because they mentioned bubbly and then Topo Chico, which I think Topo Chico is pretty. That's pretty clean. So
that's just water, basically.
There.
Yeah,
right.
That's the healthy stuff, and that's a personal favorite of mine. But it's kind of hard to come by in the Midwest.
You used to make fun of me for getting it because it's a little bit more expensive for water, and then all of a sudden you started drinking it. Again, my bad influence on you getting to spend more money.
Well, I found out you could get it at Target near me, so it's not as pricey as I thought it would be, but so I enjoy it from time to time.
You can buy it on Amazon as well. I had it shipped to my office, like a 24 pack, and it wasn't shipping was free because of Amazon Prime, and it really wasn't that much more expensive. So there's ways if you really want the Topo Chico, and if they want to give us an endorsement and advertising, just hit us up if you know anybody at Coke and Topo Chico. We will have one of those every episode now that we're putting it on YouTube.
Yeah, send us some free carbonated water. Our next piece is from the Wall Street Journal again. Friend of the show, Dan Heron, actually he has a pick in here and a quote, so he's hitting it big time. This article is about how accountants break the bad news about tax refunds with chocolate and tissues. So a little backstory on this is with the new Tax Act, there was withholdings went down for federal taxes, so people's paychecks went up throughout 2018. And the normal person is not going to put that aside come tax time. They're going to spend it or do whatever they're going to do with it. So I guess there's been a lot of surprises when people have been filing their taxes, whether they're doing it themselves or going to a CPA, and their refunds are lower than last year. Well, that's just because they paid less tax throughout the year. And when you look at the tax paid for a good, I think, majority of people, the total tax has gone down. But because refunds have gone down as well, people are upset because I guess a lot of people bank on that refund in April to either pay down some debt or go on a trip or whatnot. But this article lists the different things that accountants are doing with their clients to kind of, help them feel a little better when they come into the office and find out that they're going to owe money instead of get a refund. So Dan, I guess, gives out candy. And last year he gave out only 1 or 2 buckets of candy to his clients. And this year he's already gone through 4. So apparently people are upset and they're using candy to kind of get through the tough times.
I'm going to put my CPA on notice that he needs to step his game up. And when we're going over our quarterly estimates, have some candy handy for me. But yeah, that's huge for Dan. That's awesome that he's there, because he's one of our, shout out to Dan. He's one of our loyal listeners. Always, as soon as it gets posted on Twitter, he's always sharing it and putting it out there. So it's always cool to see friends of the show get publicity, and the picture was huge. I think that maybe LaCroix might want to reach out to CPAs and see if they can weasel themselves in as the drink of choice for when they're giving bad news. So speaking of tax returns and people using that and banking on it and being disappointed because they're less, not really looking at the fact that they actually paid less taxes over the course of the year. What's your take on a tax return? A refund, I mean, not a return, but a refund.
Well, I mean, you know me with always the exact, personal finance answer, as you want it to be as close to zero as possible, because you don't want to have a surprise come tax time where you're gonna have to pay a big amount that you haven't really budgeted for, and at the same time you don't want to give the government an interest-free loan. So I think a good strategy is to get it as close to zero as possible, and even pay just a little bit. If, as long as you're budgeting for that. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of kind of withholding too much throughout the year and then getting a big refund. But if that's the only way you can save, then I guess that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I just did this. You can't see this if you're listening, but I pointed my finger. I was going to say, I'm with you on that. I think that it makes no sense to give a tax or a interest-free loan to the government, but I don't think everybody saves their refund when they get it. But if that's the only way that if you got the extra money back throughout the course of the year and you were not going to be disciplined and you spent it, then I think a behavior hack of relying on your refund and saying you're going to save the majority of it, if not all of it, as an annual savings strategy. If that's the only way that you can do it, if you're being honest with yourself, then I think I could let that slide. But I know a lot of people use that to go on vacation and do other things. So it's really not, that angle is not going to work for most people, but I'm in the same camp, especially now that interest rates are going up. Back when interest rates were zero, okay, you're giving the government an interest-free loan, you're earning zero in your savings account. Okay, not a big deal. But now that you can actually be disciplined and save or invest it, I'm in your camp. I think that you should try to get as little back as possible.
And one thing I just wanted to call out about this is, most people, if they're having a CPA do their tax return, they're only going there in March to get it done, right? They're not checking up throughout the year, because first off, it's going to cost more money, but that's where you're going to get your benefit. If they, if you get what you pay for, basically, with a professional service like that. So if you don't want to get the checkup midway through the year to make sure you're not withholding, way too little and you're going to owe a big amount, like, don't get mad at the CPA, which a few clients apparently do. They get mad at the accountant when it wasn't really the accountant's fault. They're just kind of filing everything together from what their client had done throughout the year. So I think it's if you want that next level of service, you have to pay for it. And then there's one other thing in here that made me laugh, because the stereotypical introvert CPA. One CPA, he was saying how he keeps a big mug of coffee on his desk, so when his clients need to pull themselves together, he can drink from the coffee to give them a boost, and also give them somewhere else to look while they're crying or trying to pull themselves together. So I thought that was a nice little poke at the CPA.
You sent a post from Ramp Capital. Again, he's becoming our new Morgan Housel, I feel like.
He's killing it.
I'm glad he's writing again. This is real good, but it's called Nosedive. So what was it about this one that you liked?
Yeah, so I haven't read The Geometry of Wealth by Brian Portnoy. I think you have, right?
I have, and he was a guest on my other podcast.
Nice. Yeah, so it's definitely on my to-read list. But what Ramp calls out from that book, as Ramp is reading the book, is that there's a pretty good chance you know a great deal about your best friend's marriage, health, and job, but close to nothing about his or her finances. What's your best friend's salary? Is he deeply in debt, or has he saved enough for retirement? Does he have a budget? So Ramp just goes on to discuss on how it's kind of weird. We'll share our health information with our friends and family, but like no one will share, their financial standing. Do they budget? Like no one talks about that, right? And he kind of points out how kind of crazy that is, and how even with his own parents, Ramp's got a kid, so I'm assuming he's older than 30 from what I can tell. So his parents are probably getting close to retirement, but he says he has no idea how much they make. he, no idea how much they have for retirement. It's just not discussed. And I think it's different for every family. Some people share a little more around the numbers than others, but I think this is pretty typical, where it's kind of a gray area where people will talk about religion, sex, politics, but when it comes to money, no one wants to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add to that other than I totally agree that it's a problem. And I think that I almost would feel like it would be more normal for like peers to talk about money and finances and what's going on, more so as like mom and dad telling you how much they make. And I don't know why, but same thing. Growing up, we didn't talk about money that much. And actually, like there was a period of time when I was in college, I had no idea what was going on with my parents, and my behavior and things I was doing would have changed if I knew what was going on financially for them. But I feel like if you and your friends are talking about this and incorporating it, I think that you can develop kind of good behavior for the group and
Yeah.
not be tempting each other to go out and spend more, keeping up with the Joneses. If you know that what everybody's doing, like if I have a friend that I know is struggling and I know that, or they don't make as much as I might make, that I might be more aware of that and not ask them to come do stuff and put them on the spot, because I know that they're going to say yes and they're going to spend more than they should. I might try to take that into consideration and be a good friend and say, hey, I'm not going to put them in a bind. And like we talked about, it was last week or whatever, let's come to my house and hang out and keep the cost low and still have a good time being together
Yeah.
rather than going and spend a whole bunch of money. So, do you think it'll change? Do you think that people will talk about it more?
I think we kind of live in this little subset of financial Twitter where, a lot of the people we talk with, they're probably more open with their kids and their parents and their friends about, money and those kind of topics. But, for others where it's not as big of a priority, I don't think there'll be some cosmic shift unless we get to some point where, all the boomer parents start to retire, and then the kids start to feel that burden. Maybe if their parents weren't really ready for retirement, and they're going to have to start shouldering some of that burden. So that's one of the main reasons why I think it's great to try to have those conversations with your family, so you kind of know what to expect going down the road. But it's definitely a tough conversation to have, and it'll vary depending on what family you're in.
I mean, we do live in that world of finance, you and I, like the blogs and the people that we associate with all the time. But I wonder if the fact that there are so many blogs out there across the financial landscape, whether it be like the FIRE movement, the stuff that we read, just the personal finance, how I paid off student loans. I wonder if since it's written about more and it's more out there, if over time that becomes more conversational. People are talking about, oh, I read this, and somebody says, well, I did that, and it kind of comes up a little bit more. I don't think that it changes across all of society, but I think it will become more okay to talk about as time continues to go on. I think.
Well, we can only hope.
Do you ever watch Black Mirror? References at Black Mirror on Netflix. I never saw it.
Never seen it.
Okay, well, that ends that conversation.
Yeah, so the next article is from Humble Dollar, which we've been sharing quite a bit lately as well, and it was called "Lighten the Load." And the author Dennis, he's written some similar posts in the past, and he's a retired individual, retired at 58 from Boeing, and I really like where he takes this, because he talks about not spending on things or vacations, and taking some of that money, not spending on it 100%, but taking some of that money and spending on things you don't like. So, he doesn't want to get under his sink and fix a leaky faucet anymore, or the spigot in the backyard. He's going to hire a plumber to do that, because that money he's going to spend on that is going to make him happier, because it's removing a negative thing from his life. And I think that's something that people don't think about when it comes to, using money to try to, bring joy or happiness to their lives, is you can get happier by removing something that makes you unhappy. You don't have to buy something else to make you happy. You could just pay for something to get rid of it, to get it out of your life. If mowing your grass is like the bane of your existence, well, then budget for that and pay someone to do it. And that that'll bring you happiness, just because you don't have to do something you hate. And I know we've talked about this before, and Justin, you've started outsourcing a few things in your life, as obviously you and your wife are business owners and are very busy. And one thing I can think of too is like, I'll fly whenever I can instead of driving, just because driving's a hassle to me. So I'll spend that a little bit of extra money to fly, just because I think it's less of a hassle personally. So that's just like one thing I can think of off the top of my head.
This resonates with me so much, more along the lines of, it's not even to outsource the stuff I don't like. the one thing I've outsourced that I hate is cutting the grass. And eventually the boys will do that. So that'll be a chore of theirs.
Oh
I never
yeah,
have
for
to do it
sure.
again and I have to pay. But it's just the biggest waste of hour of my time. I don't enjoy it. I know some people do. But this fixing the pipe, funny thing when you said spigot, it was probably like 5 years ago that I learned how spigot was actually spelled. I had no idea it was spelled like that. I always thought it was like Spicket or something like that. Like I never knew it was spelled the
Pretty
right
sure
way.
there's a G in there somewhere.
Yeah,
So.
that is. It's Spigot, not what I ever thought. I know that now, but I was an adult when I learned how to spell that. Anyways, it's not that I don't like doing those things. I actually think it would be fun to be able to fix stuff. I don't have the confidence to be able to fix it.
Mhm.
So therefore, my thought is I'm just going to pay somebody to do it right and do it right the first time rather than get frustrated trying to do it, mess it up even worse, and spend more money and be out that time when somebody comes in and fixes it anyway. So, but I totally get that. And I think until you hit a point of life where your time becomes more restricted, you don't understand the value of paying somebody to do something that you don't like or don't think you're good at. Because when you have nobody has unlimited time, but before you have kids or you have a career that's really demanding, you've got the time to do that stuff. So maybe you don't like it, but it's not that big of a deal. But when you have so many hours to get stuff done, you and I were talking about beforehand, you're studying and working out and how the routine hasn't been there. Like if you could pay somebody to take the CFP test for you, you probably would. That would let you get back to doing the things that are really your most enjoyable thing. So, but your time now is split up between work and studying, and you're married, and so I think you're getting to that point where it's easier to outsource stuff and pay for things. And also when you get to a level of being able to afford it, I always thought people were crazy when they said pay people to pay. It makes total sense to pay somebody less than what your hourly rate would be. So like I bill out for my hourly planning at $250 an hour. If I can pay somebody $100 an hour to do something, even if I like doing it, that's good use of my money because my time is more valuable than the $100. And I used to think people were crazy when they said that, and now I get it.
Mhm.
So I like this.
Well, yeah. One point I want to make on that is, obviously it's going to be different from you, where you can go out and get more clients with that time, or service the
Right.
clients you have right now. But where another person who's more in a salaried 9 to 5, they have to do that cost benefit analysis, and if they do enjoy it, that's something they should consider as well, even if it doesn't cost that much to outsource it. Because I do think by doing things, yourself, DIYing it, you're gonna derive some sort of fulfillment from that. Every time you walk by that faucet you fixed or something, you'll be like, yeah, I fixed that faucet. It's gonna feel good. But yeah, I totally agree with you there.
Another regular on the show, Ben Carlson from Chaos to Concept. What'd you put this one in there for, or did I do it? I forget.
I think you did it, but yeah, you put it in because when you put it in, I realized it was about a Tim Ferriss podcast where he interviewed Jim Collins. So I actually listened to this podcast. So when you shared it, I was like, oh, okay, I know what this is about. But
Was it a good podcast?
yeah, it was a pretty good podcast. I thought it was some of those Tim Ferriss podcasts get a little too in the weeds for me, and they kind of go down those rabbit holes where I don't really need to go down. But I thought it was this piece was pretty good. It talks about how Jim Collins, who's this author who sold 10 million books about I think management and running businesses and things like that. Um, where it's all about making decisions, and don't make 100 decisions when one will do. So I think the point is a lot of people get caught up in the minutia of something where they should really take a step back, look at the big picture, and make one decision so that you're not constantly stuck in like, oh, I need to decide on this X, Y, and Z. You make one big decision, and then everything else can kind of fall in on that, and it's kind of takes away the stress. And that's the important thing. The big decision is the important thing, and you won't be necessarily wasting your time and bandwidth, or it's stuck in your mind if you're worried about the little things, because when you do the big things right, the little things should follow.
Yeah, I liked how he kind of gave the examples of things that you could do and like get the big purchases in your life right. So there's so many like clickbaity things that if you don't drink your Starbucks or do these things this is what you could amount to. And yes, those little things will add up over time, but it's like the wrong decision made for buying a car or like the big purchases in life
Yep.
that are actually more impactful to the long term. Those are the ones that actually carry more weight, not the going and getting a coffee, which you could tie back into the last thing of the enjoyment value of the $2 a day of coffee and offset that somewhere else. So I liked that, and I also liked, and I'm sure you liked it, treat your savings like a subscription, which I actually talk about this in a piece that I wrote that you're ever so kind to throw into Slack for us to discuss this week. I do think you should pay yourself first for most people in most situations. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but I just like that thought process of subscription. Like so many of us, especially younger professionals, are used to subscriptions. That's kind of the world we live in. So why not just think of your savings as another subscription payment, and it's set up automatically to go. So I like that he framed it in that way. It's one of the things Ben is awesome at, is finding these ways to take these, they're not even complex, but just take these things that people don't want to do and make them very relatable and in a term that makes sense. That, yeah, I should just do a subscription for my savings. So I liked that.
Yeah,
I did not like eat the same meals over and over again.
So I actually do that. I eat the same exact thing for breakfast every morning. That just, gives me more time, so I don't have to think about it. I do the exact same thing, but I don't do
What
it
is
for
it?
all.
I'm sure listeners want to know what is your breakfast every morning?
It's eggs. I eat eggs every morning. Sometimes
Okay.
I'll add something to it, but it's going to be eggs, and 99% of the time.
And how do you cook your eggs?
I scramble them.
Okay, that's the only way to eat eggs. Eat scrambled or hard boiled. Okay, go on. I'm sorry.
But one piece of advice that I really like, but you kind of get people on one side of the fence to the other. Figure out the types of people you don't want to be friends with, right? So as you get older, I think like when you're in elementary school, you're taught, you got to be nice to everyone. I think you should be nice to everyone, but you don't actually, once you become an adult, have to be friends with everyone. So you have that negative person in your life who gives you stress and things like that. You are, allowed, and you have permission to not have to hang out with them all the time. And I think that's something that I've taken to heart as I've gotten older as well, is really, you want to surround yourself with positive people and not negative people. So I think I like sharing this advice is, you have permission to kind of, only hang out with the people you want to, but there's other people who would totally agree with that.
Kevin, I have a secret I have to tell you.
You don't want to be my friend anymore?
Yeah, after some of your DMs over the last week, I don't think I want to be your friend anymore. Totally kidding.
We can move on to the next piece. You shared this one, Justin, from Morgan. Pure downside, no silver lining.
Yeah, and not a lot to go into. I just liked he gave these three things to think about. So he talks about how Altria is the best performing stock of all time. And it's a stock that so many people have avoided because it deals with cigarettes and tobacco and everything that goes in with it. But that negativity is actually what helped. That pessimism towards it is what helped drive its performance. So he just kind of talks about, I lost the quote I wanted to do. Pessimism is usually just extrapolating bad events without considering the offsetting reactions that push things in the other direction. That's why it's often wrong. I just thought it was an interesting way to look at things. And I like that he gave three big ones to try to avoid: reputational damage, illiquidity, and a toxic workplace. And like we're talking about stocks, but this all applies to our life as well. And reputational damage, I think in today's world is pretty big, just because things get spread so quickly, and people make judgments. We were talking about this offline before, make judgments about you without even knowing you based off of stuff they might see on social media. So you have to be really careful of that. And I think about like Roman and Leo as they grow up in this age, like one bad friendship, one bad person in your group can ruin your reputation, and then it spreads. And as a parent, like that's one of my biggest fears is the boys having something happen to them reputationally that wasn't even factful, but because of the way today works and there's no fact checking and things just get out and are spread. So I thought this was real good, just kind of a different piece. Wasn't because of the investment angle. I just thought it was pretty good, and Morgan's always a good writer. And I couldn't let Ramp get that many up on Morgan.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add on that one. So let's jump to Justin's piece from All About Your Benjamins, Unconventional Financial Planning. So I poked a little fun at you for this one on Twitter just because it's unconventional financial planning, and I tend to do things by the book. So you kind of went out in left field a little bit, and as a financial planner, you don't see this happen very often. So just share why you wrote this piece and what kind of sparked the interest here.
So over the last year, I've been working more with business owners and entrepreneurs, and I think back to starting my company, which I allude to in this piece, that sometimes the right answer for an individual and for a plan is not the textbook answer of max out your 401k, pay yourself first, avoid debt. Like for most people, that is 100% the right thing to do because that's what they need. But there are people who are trying to start a business or are comfortable with that risk and understand what the trade-offs are, And if that's the only way that they can make a dream happen or get a business started, I don't think there's anything wrong with a financial advisor building that into the plan. And for most of my career, I would have never told somebody, take money from a Roth IRA to go start that business. It would be, okay, let's plan for the next year to save up that $10,000 that you need to start that fund. And there's nothing wrong with that strategy, but sometimes things need to be happening right away. I think of some business owners that I know that their hand is kind of forced, and it's either now or never, and we've got to get this going. So what are our options? And then the key thing is to discuss all of the trade-offs. So understand what the tax implications could be, if there are any. Understand what the market average return is, and what's versus what you're doing. And I think it's okay for advisors to go outside the box with their planning. Again, not for everybody, and it doesn't mean be reckless with it and do it all the time. But if somebody has a business plan that makes total sense, the opportunity's there, all the stars are aligned, but it means they have to cash in a 401k, then I think if it's all there and they believe in themselves, I think that's okay. Plan for the tax side of things. Know that, hey, if this goes wrong, you might have to work another 10 years to make up this risk, but you're young and let's go for it. Because if you look at people who have created the greatest wealth, if that's their goal, they're business owners. Like, not that you can't make a good living in a traditional job in W-2, but if you're trying to make a bigger impact, there's more risks that come with it. And I think that's okay to build that into a financial plan, and also make sure everything else is in line. So we're taking this big risk by cashing in your 401k or your Roth IRA, but you have disability insurance, you have life insurance, you have an umbrella policy, you have all the other things to protect every other aspect of your life. So if this business risk doesn't work out, not everything falls. You just start back over a little bit and you build it back up. So I've talked to more entrepreneurs. I actually had a meeting with new clients that they're starting a business up in Detroit, and that kind of made me think about it. And I really enjoy that type of planning as well. And I finally got to a point where I was comfortable with myself as an advisor to go out and say, I'm willing to think outside the box when it's appropriate and actually put down on paper, this is my recommendation. When if you were to read it in your CFP book, like, it wouldn't even be in there. I know you were cringing as you were reading it.
Well, that's the thing.
But so that was the point of it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. People are going to be different. Obviously, this isn't going to work for everyone. It's probably going to work for, a certain minority of people who are extremely passionate about something they want to do. And if you're that passionate about it and you just need to do it, it might make sense to kind of go against the grain a little bit and go against the textbook answer and, take a different route if you're that passionate about it. And then you also have all the other things in place where that if you do fail, you're not falling all the way back to zero or negative, right? You're going to still have somewhere to kind of move on from, and you won't be starting from square one again. So yeah, I think this makes sense. It's not going to be for everybody, but I don't think it's reckless as long as you're, doing all the things to plan for it.
And I'm not going to ever tell anybody take a 401k loan or cash in your IRA to go buy a car or go take a trip. Like, I'm talking about, we're basically shifting assets, investable assets, from one place to another. We're taking it from the market to your own business. And yes, your own business is riskier, but the reward could also be better. And it's not always a financial reward. It also is a freedom of doing what you want and having a better quality of life, because now you are the CEO and you are the boss and you're living the life that you want to. And maybe you're not even making more money, but it's better for you and what you're going for. So it's really about shifting assets to different type of investments and being more flexible with it. And I'm kind of excited to incorporate that more with planning when it comes up with clients in the future. So that was kind of also my way of letting the public know that, hey, if you're thinking of doing this type of stuff, then there are advisors, not even necessarily me only, there are advisors that do think outside the box, and it is okay. And then I also want to, go to the last piece I shared. I wanted to do it because I thought it was the stupidest headline ever. The Wall Street Journal clickbaits, stock market volatility takes a bite out of U.S. households' net worth. And then the subheadline is, after increasing the first 3 quarters of 2018, household net worth fell by $3.73 trillion in the fourth quarter, which makes absolute sense given the market had a correction. I don't know why this is newsworthy. And the thing that, like, there are people who actually sold during that time period and have missed out on this rally at the beginning of the year. So their net worth actually did take a bite, but everybody else who is smart and disciplined, we've recovered a good portion of that. And if you were saving along the way because you're still working, you're probably ahead of the game now because of the dollar cost averaging. So I just thought it was a stupid headline.
Yeah, you warned me ahead of time that this was clickbait, but when I started reading it, quickly understood why is because this was published in March talking about Q4 of 18, where we had a bear market in US equities. Like, no kidding that net worths fell. Like, people's net worths are tied up in their home and their 401k for the most part, and the 401k most likely dropped if you were in equities. So it's common sense. It's scaring people because maybe they're thinking, oh, this is now. No, this was 3-4 months ago now.
Right.
So it's just generating clicks. And I guess, I love the Wall Street Journal, but they got to make some dollar bills too, I guess.
I think we just use this as an opportunity, not to give advice, but just to remind people that the market goes up and down. Don't react, because in this situation, even if this headline came out in December when things were bad, if you reacted to it and sold, you're out now because the market's recovered and you're still sitting in cash. And now you're trying to figure out, well, is it going to keep on going up, or is last week is that the beginning of the next downturn because the market was down? Like, it's a losing game. You're going to drive yourself crazy. So don't make judgments off of headlines, and have a financial plan.
All right, Justin, I know you want to brag about how good your self-control is when it comes to food, so let's hear it.
So Lent just started, and I gave up sweets for Lent, which I usually don't do. I'll give up something else, but my diet has not been the greatest as of late. It hasn't been bad, but it hasn't been as good as I would want it to be. So I use this as a refresher, and Ange does it every year. It's funny. Like, during Lent, you could not force feed candy or anything sweet to Ange. She will not budge. Like, as soon as you get outside of that 40-day window, she'll say she's not going to have it, but she will. So I'm doing this kind of alongside with her, kickstart my good eating. The trouble is going to be, we go to my parents or my in-laws pretty much every Sunday for dinner, and there's always sweets there. And I know tonight's my parents' house, and I think we're going to be celebrating my birthday, my mom's birthday, and Angie's birthdays at the end of the month. And I'm sure there's going to be cake. And I don't know for anybody out there.
Are you going to turn it down?
Well, so here's the thing. Growing up, I never knew this until I met Ange. But apparently in the Catholic Church, there is, like, Lent is actually ends up being more than 40 days. And if you strip out the Sundays, then you get to the 40 days or something like that. So my wife's grandfather, who's a deacon, said that you can actually have what you gave up on Sundays. It's kind of like a holy day, and you're actually able to have it. And usually,
sounds like a cheat.
usually I don't use that cheat, but tonight I might use that cheat if my parents did get cake, because I don't want them to waste their money. And I'm only going to have a piece of cake. Like, my parents have candy and Oreos, and I usually get weak there. None of that. Only cake if they have it. So I'll give you an update next. Well, actually, we're not going to be recording next week. I'll give you an update in 2 weeks, how the last 2 weeks have gone.
Yeah, I want to hear about it.
But on recommendations, because my computer's at 13% and I didn't bring my charger down, so we got to hustle. Recommendation for this week is my Apple Pencil. I love my Apple Pencil for my iPad, and I did not get it when I initially bought it, and I obviously did, and I love it. I like taking notes with it, and it took me a while. So a little clue or piece of advice: if you use regular notebook paper styled on the iPad to write, my handwriting wasn't near as good. And my intern was writing on, like, graph paper on his iPad. I switched to graph paper, and my writing is so much better. I don't know what it is, but if you don't like the way you write on the iPad, if you use the Apple Pencil, check out the graph paper.
Well, our logo for the podcast was done with an Apple Pencil on an iPad, so there you go.
We need to get some swag made for the show and send out to Dan and, like, to our loyal listeners.
You're not going to like my recommendation for Lent here, because my wife and I don't like the same TV at all. So we can rarely find a show or a documentary or something that we both like. So we found something on Netflix. It's a 4-part documentary series on food, and it's called Salt, Fat, Acid, and Heat. And I guess those are the 4 main elements of good cooking. And so each of the episodes is on one of those 4. And we were through 2, and it's awesome. It's so cool. The chef that does the show, she's awesome. I guess it's based off a book that she's written in the past. And if you look it up, if you Google the show, it's got 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I don't think I never see that. So it's pretty good if you like cooking or you like eating. I'd recommend it.
Is it just a cooking show, or does it give you, like, the science behind stuff too?
A little bit of the science, but she travels to the different places, where she can teach about it. So salt is big in Japan, so she goes to Japan to talk about salt. And we watched the fat episode, and fat's big in Italy with, like, olive oil and pork and things like that. So she travels to the different places, and they get a little bit into the science about it. But so Big
I
recommendation.
would like that. I'll have to check that out because I like watching I'll watch food documentaries, even though I know documentaries, you know, to be careful with them, just to get me refocused on eating healthy. If I go like through a bad period, I'll watch like Fed Up or one of those other ones that like scare me into not eating sugar. So I don't mind watching the food documentaries.
This is going to
So
make you want to eat the most unhealthy things with tons of
Oh.
fat and ribs, and it's not what you're going to want to watch until Lent's over. So
Okay, sounds good. All right, we got anything else for this week?
nope, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Head on over to allaboutyourbenjamins.com and ferventfinance.com for the show notes. This should be up on YouTube again, our second episode that you can watch us dialogue for the episode on YouTube. If you're watching it there, head to those websites, the show notes, so you can see all the articles we discussed and the recommendations. There'll be links there as well. So thanks for listening, and we will see you all in the next episode.
Have a great week.